So during the course of 2023, we've seen continued regulatory engagement and quite a lot of enforcement by the Irish Data Protection Commission and other supervisory authorities across Europe against both domestic and international companies. Just in the last 12 months in Ireland, we've seen the Data Protection Commission issue fines in excess of 1.5 billion in five very significant inquiries into large technology companies. We certainly see that enforcement trend continuing into 2024 and beyond. And the question arises, well, what will be the priorities of regulators, including the Irish Data Protection Commission, as they move into 2024? And again, we see not a significant amount of change in terms of the primary focus, which will remain the focus on children and of other vulnerable groups in the community, including the elderly. And that's likely to be a trend through 2024, as it has been through 2023. In addition to its focus on children, we've seen a new focus on the application of artificial intelligence solutions by organizations and the adjacent processing of personal data that goes with that. This is clearly an interest to many regulators, including the Data Protection Commission, and we expect 2024 there'll be a significant focus on the regulation of artificial intelligence by the Data Protection Commission. What organizations often forget is that the GDPR itself has many provisions, including Article 5, Article 6, Article 12, 13, 14, and importantly, Article 22, which are all capable of regulating a lot of the artificial intelligence solutions that we're seeing proliferating and being used at present. And we are already seeing the Data Protection Commission and other regulators using the GDPR as a means to engage with companies that are deploying these new artificial intelligence tools. What's rather interesting about next year is we're also going to see a change in regulator, in that Helen Dixon, after nearly 10 years in the role, is going to step back as Data Protection Commissioner, and we're likely to see two new commissioners at least being appointed in 2024. So that no doubt will and could cause a change in a shift in regulatory priorities, and it's far from clear as to what those new regulatory priorities be, so we have to simply continue to watch this space. Another development we're going to see in 2024 will be reforms to the GDPR, which will be 6 years old in 2024, and there's going to be a procedural regulation likely passed next year, which is going to make the GDPR easier to enforce by regulators, and it's also going to make it easier for complainants to make complaints and to have those complaints managed by different supervisory authorities around the EU. A couple of important aspects of this new procedural GDPR regulation are the following. There will be, as I said, increased abilities for individuals to make complaints, and there'll be a harmonized procedure for complaints to be processed by complainants across the EU. In terms of those organizations and companies that are going to get investigated, we'll see increased rights for those and increased rights to be heard for organizations being investigated, including in front of the European Data Protection Board. There will also be streamlined investigation procedures put in place, whereby supervisory authorities around the EU will be able to better influence the scope of investigations being incepted and carried out by the Data Protection Commission out of Ireland in its capacity as lead supervisory authority. And so the engagement by other supervisory authorities around Europe will occur earlier, and they will have a greater influence in the scope of these investigations. In terms of other new laws affecting technology companies, the Digital Markets Act and the Digital Services Act are both hugely important pieces of legislation. The Digital Markets Act focuses on a pretty small cohort of very large gatekeepers of the internet, and at present we have 6 large technology companies have been designated under the Digital Markets Act as gatekeepers, and their obligations will be quite significant under the Digital Markets Act. But obviously, given the fact that it's quite a smaller cohort being regulated under the DMA, what's causing arguably much more attention amongst our larger cohort of clients would be the Digital Services Act. The Digital Services Act takes effect for most companies next February, even though it's been on the statutory books since 2022. And earlier this year, 17 organizations have been designated by the Commission as being very large online platforms or very large online search engines. And these very large organizations will have additional obligations under the DSA. However, for many other companies, the DSA will take effect next February 2024, and that will create quite a significant change for a lot of companies in terms of enhanced obligations. In terms of other new areas which will affect our clients in 2024, the Artificial Intelligence Act, or the AI Act, is likely to finally be signed into law later this year at the end of 2023. And after a 2-year grace period, it's likely to take effect in early 2026. The AI Act will adopt a risk-based approach when it comes to regulating products. At the top of the pyramid of risk will be unacceptable risk, where AI tools at that level will simply be prohibited across the EU. And then the next area is known as high risk, and that will create the largest amount of regulation for organizations that fall within the high risk category. At present, we await to see how the law will be finalized over the next few weeks and how the Commission will issue guidance subsequently in relation to what comprises high-risk AI. But what is clear is that for organizations falling within this high-risk category, there will be significant and onerous and new obligations for them in terms of their product design and ongoing compliance when it comes to the AI tools that they will be deploying, both for their internal purposes and that they may be making available to the public as part of their services. We're seeing a great deal of compliance monitoring and compliance auditing going on because there is various sets of new laws about to take effect. The first thing clients are trying to work out is where they sit within those new laws. So take, for example, the DSA, which creates multiple regulated categories of service providers. Our clients are trying to work out what category they fall into, because that's the starting point in order to understand what elements of the new laws will affect them. So a significant amount of sort of compliance auditing is ongoing. Secondly, having identified how the new laws are going to affect our clients, we see compliance programs up and running at this stage in order to ensure compliance with the DSA and with the DMA, especially for those companies that have been designated under the DMA as gateways, and for those organizations that are designated by the Commission under the DSA as very large online search engines and very large online platforms. And for all other organizations that are regulated by the DSA, again, having identified what categories they fall within, compliance programs are now being rolled out in order to enhance their transparency, to refine their terms of service, and to do the various other things that are going to be required to ensure compliance under the DSA when it takes effect for most companies next February 2024. What we think about a lot in here as we work through regulatory investigations, which ultimately result in very large fines, or often result in very large fines and corrective measures, we often wonder, if organizations collectivized and engaged and prepared voluntary codes where they would take the GDPR and create codes which would regulate their industries specifically, we think these voluntary compliance mechanisms should ultimately obviate and reduce the requirement for significant regulatory investigations, because industries will already have brought themselves to a point where they're collectively, through voluntary codes, enhancing and improving their GDPR compliance. So during 2023, we've seen an increase in the amount of voluntary codes being approved at European Union level, and we see that as a very positive trend in terms of improving how data is processed for the benefit of society and how industries can collectively comply into the future.